I am New York.
Yes, I'm New York.
I am New York.
Yo soy Nueva York.
Sono New York.
Je suis New York.
We are New York.
Welcome to DiverseCITY, where we explore New York's eclectic enclaves, one neighborhood at a time. I'm Zyphus LeBron. This month, we're heading to Coney Island, the neighborhood on Brooklyn's southern end. Known the world over for its boardwalk amusements and amusement parks. Coney Island was hugely popular in the early 20th century, but started losing some of its glamour after World War II. The ethnically diverse, mainly middle-class area struggled with the decline of the amusement business through the 70s and early 2000s. Then the arrival of MCU Park in 2001, now called Maimonides Park, turned those fortunes around. Now the park is home to the very popular minor league baseball team, the Brooklyn Cyclones. There are many stories as to how the neighborhood got its name. One of the most popular is that Coney is the Dutch word for rabbits, and supposedly the area was overrun with bunnies when the early settlers arrived. Years later, the area is once again set for another transformation. The famed Luna Park recently broke ground on the expansion plans for new attractions and pedestrian plazas. On this episode, Dredged Up, environmental concerns over a ferry terminal that's scheduled to open by year's end. Not amused, small boardwalk businesses struggle to stay afloat amidst the pandemic and a wave of real estate development. And dog days, some frank talk about wieners in this waterfront community. Those stories and more coming up as we explore Coney Island, Brooklyn. Travel west of the main amusement district of Coney Island and you'll find Coney Island Creek. Once a highly toxic waterway known to locals as Stink Creek, the nearly 2-mile-long tidal inlet is now a jewel of the community. But as Craig Thompson reports, that could soon change.
Coney Island Creek was once a blight on the city, polluted, toxic, entirely unusable. But since 1972, a slow and steady cleanup has revitalized the creek and surrounding environs.
And it's taken 50 years to get it to the point now where the community can enjoy it. It's a community asset.
Charles Denson has been a resident of Coney Island for 60-plus years. He's also perhaps the neighborhood's most well-known historian. He's documented the creek since he was a child. He's very concerned that a new ferry service landing to be built in the creek could undo all this progress.
And after watching 60 years of improvements on the creek and watching it become this incredible community asset, it's so tragic that it's ending with this project, which will pretty much destroy the public access to Coney Island Creek.
The project started back in 2019, and it's part of Mayor de Blasio's efforts to increase ferry service citywide. When the city's Economic Development Corporation, or EDC, did a citywide survey of residents to determine where a new ferry service landing should go, the answer was
over 60% of respondents were asking for ferry service in Coney Island.
James Wong is the executive director of the EDC's ferry division. The EDC chose the creek for several reasons, including the fact that it is relatively deep water and the existing Kaiser Park Pier would make construction cheaper.
One of the things we wanted to make sure that we were doing with this ferry landing is ensuring that it's not just for people who are, visitors to the area, but in fact for residents. So this ferry landing is in the location that it is specifically to support residents who are going to be commuting from the western portion of Coney Island, where it's not really that close to the subway, into Manhattan.
Even with that in mind, the location has not been met with widespread approval.
There was an aniline dye factory. There was this cement plant, scrap metal yards. They used to build Navy destroyers there and other ships and break them apart years later. All of this is in the bed of Coney Island Creek. The sediments remain, and they are a historical legacy of contamination.
That's Ida Sanoff, a resident of the peninsula for over 40 years, and executive director of the conservationist group Natural Resources Protective Association. Her concern is that the dredging of the creek would leave all these contaminants exposed in an area where people swim, fish, and even conduct baptisms. Wong says the EDC has got that covered.
We are using things like an environmental bucket, which helps ensure that contaminated water doesn't get back out into the open water that we're working within. We also are using a turbidity curtain, which will help ensure that anything that is moved is going to settle down before we mobilize away from the site. Is going to be one that's done responsibly. We know and care a lot about the creek. We've been in touch with the community for a long time now, and definitely hear the concerns and are making sure that we are working closely with our contractors to ensure that this is going to be done in as ecologically sensitive a manner as possible.
All this is happening while the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is examining water samples to determine if the creek can be designated a Superfund site because of high levels of mercury and other pollutants. If it is, work must stop immediately, but until that happens, construction continues with the goal of opening in the fall, an idea that does not sit well with Denson.
That's the sad thing. Who's going to, once this is put in operation, who's watching out for the public interest, public safety?
For DiverseCITY, I'm Craig Thompson.
Coney Island is famous for its rides and sideshows, many that have stood the test of time. At the heart of many of these businesses are generations of families who are now faced with the prospect of a crushing rise in rents as they try to rebuild after being shut down by COVID-19. Shannon Ayala has that story.
Brooklyn Beach Shop, a souvenir and beach supply store in Coney Island's Boardwalk, has been struggling to recoup since the state shut down non-essential businesses in the summer of 2020. Maya Haddad Miller runs the shop. It's one of the Haddad family businesses started by her father, Haim Haddad.
I own the Brooklyn Beach Shop with my dad, Haim Haddad, and we've been in Coney Island, our family, since '96.
Many businesses on and around the boardwalk are family-owned.
So for some of them, this is truly their livelihoods. These intergenerational family businesses, literally, I would say, live and breathe Coney Island.
Alexandra Silversmith is the executive director of the Alliance for Coney Island. The nonprofit organization works to support nearly 200 businesses in the neighborhood. She says businesses large and small are interconnected like an ecosystem and feel the pain together.
The large amusements really help with the small amusements and the small attractions and the businesses because they don't have the foot traffic without each other.
Silversmith's organization estimates the pandemic led to losses of somewhere around 80% of revenue compared to 2019, or about $100 million. This comes just about a decade after other seismic events changed the boardwalk. In the words of the city's Planning Department and Economic Development Corporation a decade back, the once vibrant area had shrunk and deteriorated. So in 2009, the city rezoned the area in an attempt to ramp up tourism and residential development.
It brought with it a promise of a whole lot of infrastructure, a new amusement operator for a lot of the properties, which was Central Amusement International, who created Luna Park, and just a lot of promise and hope for the area.
The city's plan was to build a nearly 30-acre revitalized amusement district with, quote, housing opportunities and affordable housing. Central Amusement International was enlisted by the city to manage the Luna Park section of the amusement district. The company did its part to make over the boardwalk by trying to evict 9 tenants. Some of those businesses included long-standing food joints like Ruby's Bar and Grill and Paul's Daughter, which managed to evade the eviction. Silversmith says the subsequent development is already making the area more expensive.
I mean, it's just changed the whole area in general. I mean, the street outside is paved because there was infrastructure put in. You'll see, there's just tons of new housing here being built literally right across the street while we're sitting here. So it's just changed the whole dynamics. And with that influx, it's estimated, I think, 4,000 new residents in the end. But with that influx, right, the real estate is expected that there's more business. So those expectations have inflated prices, some would say prematurely, I think.
More recently, in January 2020, the New York Times reported that Central Amusement International was at it again. This time they were negotiating new leases, which would raise rents for people like Haddad Miller.
Fortunately, we survived the renewal, but it came with, for us specifically, it was around a 70% increase to our previous rent.
Silversmith says an eviction moratorium plus government grants helped some of the other businesses to survive, but amusements didn't get the kind of federal support received by museums and arts institutions. She says there's plenty of new things to see for anyone who wants to visit Coney Island any time of year.
I'm hopeful that they'll figure out how to be resilient and survive. But I think that's like 2022 is going to be the true test, because if they can't generate revenue, it's going to be very, very hard for the businesses to survive here.
Shannon Ayala for DiverseCITY.
Hot dogs have become synonymous with Coney Island, so much so that a specific brand of dog, Coney's, is named after the area. The food that's become a prominent symbol of Americana has a legendary history that's often connected to two immigrants who worked in the neighborhood.
The smell of cooking hot dogs, cooking sausages to fill the air, the smell of stuff coming from deep fryers filled the air at Coney Island. So there was an ocean breeze, yeah, but these other mingling with this cooked food element is just amazingly seductive. People came for it, they yearned for it.
The man waxing a little poetic about Coney Island's hot dog mystique is Professor Bruce Craig. He's a food historian who's written 2 books and several papers on the subject. He says that hot dogs are inextricably linked to Coney Island, in part due to an apocryphal tale about a German immigrant named Charles Feltman. Legend has it that Feltman was the first to put a German sausage into a bun around 1867.
There's no real evidence for that. There was a Charles Feltman for sure, and he was a famous restaurateur and a bigwig in Coney Island. But he was a baker in the middle of Brooklyn who saw the opportunity in Coney Island and got the railroads to build a railroad out there.
Feltman did also build a restaurant out there from which he sold high-end food as well as hot dogs. At the time, the area was still an island and the stomping ground for the wealthy who got there by boat. The railroad made it easier for the growing middle class to get to Coney Island. America's middle class began growing after the Civil War. In New York, their search for cheap entertainment and cheaper food took them to the Boardwalk in the 1860s.
By then in America, wherever there's a popular amusement or recreation, there's going to be food. And in the North, after the Civil War, peanuts became popular and sausages soon followed. The two go together, really. And they were sold along the beach in Coney Island.
Feltman wasn't the only one selling sausages on the Boardwalk. Other immigrants used this sort of penny capitalism to create jobs.
Street food is the quickest way to get into an economy. It doesn't cost you much for ingredients, and you can sell them at low prices and in considerable volume. And it's a cash business.
One of these men was a Polish immigrant named Nathan Handwerker. Handwerker worked as a baker for Feltman at his Boardwalk restaurant. Then, as the story goes, 2 renowned celebrities of the time, Jimmy Durante and Eddie Cantor, advised Handwerker to strike out on his own. He eventually started selling his hot dogs for a nickel when Feltman's were a dime. This was just one tactic he used to sell his products that were as good quality as Feltman's.
He was a marketer. For example, when people thought that hot dogs were not healthful, because who knows what went in them, right? Could be dogs. He dressed up a couple of actors as doctors in their white coats, and they stood outside eating hot dogs and extolling to the public, saying, "Well, these are great. These are really good for you."
Handwerker's dogs eventually became more popular than Feltman's, and their story became the age-old tale of student outpacing master. Handworker eventually opened the now iconic hot dog stand called Nathan's in the location that it still stands today.
I don't think it was a battle between them. I think they were two distinct differences. Feltman's sold sausages, but their main business was the shore dinner, which they invented, and that's fried clams and fresh seafood with sausages, of course. But it was a sit-down place, and Nathan's wasn't. Nathan's didn't have seats. You just walked up to the counter, got your hot dog, and walked away.
Much as the Nathan's brand has walked away with the collective imaginations of many foodies and tourists who continue to visit the stand today. The shop has become a big part of the Boardwalk's history and mystique, while the original Feltmans eventually went bankrupt and disappeared around 1952. A former Coney Island resident, David Sullivan, has managed to amass one of the largest private memorabilia collections that documents the neighborhood from the late 1800s to the early 20th century. He tells us about his passion for this place in his own words.
So I specialize in the earlier part of Coney Island history, which is from roughly 1870 until around 1920. So a lot of what you get from that period is paper ephemera, these paper pieces. So I would say for the collections that are of a similar time frame to mine is probably one of the larger ones out there. I believe that there's another private collector out on Long Island. I'm originally from outside of Washington, D.C., and after college, I moved to New York for work. And one weekend, my friends said, hey, why don't we just all head down to Coney Island? And so I decided to look up Coney Island online. I'd heard about it, but I didn't really know much about it. And I saw this absolutely spectacular nighttime photo of a place called Dreamland. And I said, what's Dreamland? And why isn't this in the history books that we've all read? And so I started to research a little bit and then a little more. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and that's been the last 10 years of my life. Heart of Coney Island is one man's labor of love. It truly is. And maybe that will change over time, but for now, it's my collection, and I've devoted literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. My collection consists of thousands of postcards, which is helpful for determining where things were and what they looked like to a certain degree back in the day. You also have photographs. So I have hundreds of photographs. Some of them come on old glass slides, actually. So they're not even photographs like we would think nowadays. They're actually negatives that came made on glass. I have posters. I have all kinds of pamphlets for fireworks shows, souvenir booklets. The tickets is a great example as well. And old documents. There's a lot of great technology from back in the day. People, they didn't have screens and lasers and crazy things like that. Even the light bulb was still fairly new. And so they took their postcard collecting seriously. And it's the same actually with tickets. So whenever you went on a roller coaster back 120 years ago, you actually would get a very elaborate cardboard stamped ticket. And so I then went from postcards into collecting tickets as well. One of the important things that I try to do, both as a collector and someone who wants to share and preserve the history of Coney Island, is whenever I buy a piece, if it's in bad condition, I'll actually send it off to be restored. Part of the restoration process is actually taking all of the acid out of paper so that it stops breaking down over time. And so some of the most rare pieces out there, they're very degraded, and it's very important for someone who has these pieces and wishes to preserve them for future generations to actually go through that conservation process. The purpose of what I'm doing with Coney Island is not to make money. In fact, it costs me money to try to collect and research all of these things and get them restored. My goal is to have whatever pieces of Coney Island memorabilia exist find the right home. And that home oftentimes is me, but if it's not me, what I do is I pass on the referral to someone else. My website tends to get approximately 30,000 unique visitors a year. And of those, a good number of them are from Canada, the UK. I've had messages from France, from Germany, like I said, from Japan as well. And so it's about celebrating Coney Island on an international scale.
Finally from us, the neighborhood was once teeming with bright lights and sounds of amusement parks, but the Boardwalk is now home to only two of them, Luna Park and Dino's Wonder Wheel Amusement Park. Vanessa Monet has more about the neighborhood's heyday.
Before Coney Island had self-contained amusement parks, the area showcased individual attractions beginning in the 1870s. These included a steam-powered carousel, an iron tower with steam-operated elevators that took visitors up 300 feet, and one of the world's first roller coasters. It was called the Switchback Railway, and it debuted in 1884. The famed Coney Island Cyclone roller coaster now stands in its place. The Cyclone opened in 1927. The ride boasts an 85-foot drop-off, making it the second steepest wooden roller coaster in the world. Coney Island's first enclosed amusement park was Sea Lion Park. Built in 1895, it was established by an extreme sports showman named Paul Boynton and included the first Shoot the Chutes ride, which became a staple at future amusement parks. It also included the first loop roller coaster. Though it was successful, by 1902, Sea Lion Park was closed due to increasing competition and a season of heavy rains. At its height, Coney Island contained three competing amusement parks: Steeplechase Park, Luna Park, and Dreamland. They made the area world famous. Steeplechase Park had the longest run, operating from 1897 to 1964. That was in part because the owners continually brought in new rides and amusements, such as the parachute jump. The parachute jump is all that remains of Steeplechase Park today. Though it is no longer operational, the 250-foot tall steel frames lighting system has been restored. In 1903, Luna Park opened partially on the grounds of what had been Sea Lion Park and ushered in what some refer to as the golden age of the amusement park. Luna Park operated there until it was mostly destroyed in a fire in 1944 and never reopened. In 2010, another amusement park of the same name opened nearby, but has no connection to the original. Dreamland was opened in 1904. It was advertised as the refined alternative to the more chaotic Luna Park. Though many of the rides were quite similar to its competitor, Dreamland featured spectacles such as human zoos and a display of premature babies in incubators. In 1911, Dreamland was also destroyed by fire. Today, Luna Park and Dino's Wonder Wheel Amusement Park continue Coney Island's legacy as an amusement park destination for tourists and families alike. For Diverse City, I'm Vanessa Monet.
That's our look at Coney Island, Brooklyn. Join us next month when we'll head over to Staten Island. Till then, thanks for joining us as we explore our diverse city.